Hello everybody. Well, I thought I would just go and look some of this up because I've been watching the story of Utred of Bebbanburg, The Last Kingdom. It's just there. He's a German actor. It was episode after episode after episode, but each episode's like a film. But there it is, you see the fiction. So they're saying Utred of Bebbanburg is a fictional character, but he isn't. Oh, it's just most bizarre. There was an Utred. He was called Utred the Bold. Quite incredible. And it wasn't Bebbanburg, it was Bambrough Castle. That's where he was. And he was up in Northumberland. He was up in Northumberland. And the story is slightly different because it says in here that basically his father put him in there, although he was kind of a king of that castle. His dad was still alive. But even in the story that's supposed to be the real truth about Utred, lots of death and everything, but that's what it is in The Last Kingdom. But I did enjoy it. It was good. It mentions Thatcham. He mentions Arthur. But see, it says facts and fiction down the bottom because a book was written, and maybe with how they really wanted history to be, with King Edward trying to get England back, because it seems that and even when this guy talks on the little video at the end, we are sharing it with the Vikings and running it together. A Viking might be an alderman, or there might be an English king, but they're working together. So nobody, an elder has a lot of power in those days. But anyway, I just as I started looking, it said that he was fictional. But when I looked, and then when we hear the little video at the end, you realise that it's almost the same. Maybe, I think I read somewhere, unless it's on here, you'll see that maybe there was 100 years difference. But why would you, this has been a series on television about it. And unfortunately, it's probably not quite correct. I did enjoy it because I said there was loads of things in there. But I mean, God knows how many. It was probably I think there's 8 series with 10 videos in. It's quite a lot. The amount of money it must have taken to have made this, or maybe they're all AI. But I did enjoy it. See, Utred the Bold. The other Utreds at a bit of a different time. I've made a video about it. I wondered whether Merlin was a seer, and it would have been a Viking, because when you look it up it says that he's a seer, but a seer wasn't really here. I mean, here we'd have called them, or what we look at now as witches or people with power, but he was a seer, and that is a Viking. And they haven't even told us the truth about all that, because Vikings were Indians. We're one of the only countries in the UK that doesn't have a totem, but we probably did. And if that's the actor that played him, it was good. But there you go, it talks a little bit there about the fictional character, but he is very close to Utred the Bold. I've added this bit. Basically, what it is in the history bit at the end of the video, the guy talks about him having this. I've added this bit. Basically, what it is in the history bit at the end of the video, the guy talks about him having this Viking link. But in the series, he's English. He watches his dad die on the field, and he gets kidnapped by the Vikings. And then this Viking brings him up as his own children, and he gets a Viking life. So Utred in the programme is a Saxon. Should have been a king, but his kingdom was taken away by an evil uncle. And he thinks as a Saxon, but he also thinks, and in the series he has a brother, but it's not his real brother, but it's now his brother because he was brought up with that family. And there was 2 sisters, Frida and I can't remember the other one. So there's this big link to the Vikings, but in the story it's a little bit different. But even in the history at the end of this video, the guy talks about him having this Viking link. Sorry, take out the Danish, Viking link. In the 11th century. Oh, that's 11th, that's 100 years, isn't it? But I thoroughly enjoyed watching the video. So in here we're looking at pictures of, that's the actor there. What we have is Utred of Bebbanburg, or Utred the Bold of Bambrough. But interesting that, you know, that it's actually the same person. That's the character they've taken, and he did seem to be quite a good warrior. I just found it fascinating. It's on Netflix if you want to watch it, and it's called The Last Kingdom. Lots of death, I'm afraid, but that's the way it goes. That's the same way as in the Vikings. See, Bebbanburg. I was talking to Jimbo about it last night, and this person said, "Oh, that sounds German." Bebbanburg surprised me. Bambrough, Bebbanburg. Oh, that's Bambrough. But Utred, the real one, well, supposedly the real one, he had a different name, and then his half-brother died, and then he got the name Utred because that was his name. Lots of changes of names. He became heir of Bebbanburg. So that is fiction. So it's hard to work it all out because they've used it there as that's what he was king of, but it was Bambrough. Oh, I'm going to get a headache in a minute. Maybe they'll see that's... Oh, he's Utred the Bold. Yeah, he's the 11th century. And I think Utred of Bebbanburg was the 10th century. But even there, they had bricks in the scenery. You know, like it just... Yeah. It rode everywhere, but you only ever saw them arrive. I'm going and I'm arriving. Well, sometimes you're on the journey with them, but it must have taken them weeks. Especially as he was Lord, which is a small king of Bambrough Castle, but it's Bebbanburg. Yeah. So, even that's all right. See that? So the Scottish cheese was the end of the 1st century, 1006. But Utred the Bold was the 11th century, or he was there at the end of the 10th century. So probably, yeah, it's 100 years difference. But I just thought it was interesting to show you those little bits about Utred. Utred the Bold was a real person, but these names they've got, the kings with the A and the E, that's like, they taught me that at school. Taught thousands of children that at school. Joining letters up and not having joined up writing, but using the back of letters to make other letters. Yeah, loads of us went through that. It made us dyslexic. Yeah, great. And they decided not to pilot it anymore. But anyway, I even saw in the video that that's supposed to be someone else as well, the old post for new members. I mean, obviously they had no cameras or anything in those days, but there's no drawings really, not really. But anyway, let's carry on with the video and listen to what he says. And even though he's talking about Utred the Bold, he's very, very, very similar to Utred of Bebbanburg in the series. So what do you think? Do you think it's all really the same history? Or is it just the game again? Because why would you mess up history and take someone from some other time and put him in? I don't know. Anyway, what's your thoughts?
In the year 1006, just as the south of England was racked by a new era of persistent Viking raids and incursions from across the North Sea, the newly elected King of the Scots, Malcolm II, seized his opportunity to strike south and profit from the newfound English weakness. He marched south at the head of a substantial army, and before long laid siege to the fortress town of Durham, then a regional centre of power for the Northumbrian lords, who had only recently themselves been incorporated into the Kingdom of England in 954 after the death of the last independent king of Northumbria, Eric Bloodaxe. King Ethelred in the south could barely hold on to his own lands in Wessex, let alone send aid to the other areas of England beset by the Scandinavian or Scottish raids. In York, the ealdorman Elfhelm of the southern portion of Northumbria allegedly stood idly by as the Scots ravaged the lands around Durham. Similarly, Wulftheof, the ageing ealdorman of Bernicia, the northern part of Northumbria, was too elderly to march on Durham and resist the Scots, and he remained secure and safe in his fortress of Bambrough. He did, however, send his son, Utred, in his stead. Utred, a young man descended from an ancient family of warrior kings, gathered together the Bernician forces loyal to his father, along with a substantial force from York and the southern Northumbrian lands, traditionally known as Deira. At the head of this army, Utred made a great battle against the Scots outside the walls of Durham, and won a decisive victory against them. Although Malcolm escaped from the encounter with the remnants of his forces, the Scottish dead were decapitated and their heads displayed upon the city walls as a grisly warning to others who might try their luck against the might of Northumbria. Upon hearing of the great victory in the north, and still beset by persistent Viking raiders in his own lands, Ethelred, the king of the English, rewarded the young warrior lord with the ealdormanry of Bernicia, even though his father still lived, and over the next few years he made him into one of his most trusted warriors, a necessary commodity in the wars to come. From that day forth, the young lord would be remembered under a new name, one which commemorated his bravery and his crushing decisiveness in battle. He was henceforth known as Uhtred the Bold. Born in around 971 at his father's seat of power in Bambrough, Uhtred was born into a complex time of bitter rivalries and opportunistic alliances, both between North and South and between Saxon and Dane. England was by no means a solid, unbreakable entity at this point, having only very recently been unified into a whole, and still potentially stood on the verge of fragmenting back into its constituent parts, partly due to the poor nature of King Ethelred's rule, and partly due to long-standing and deep-riven rifts between the ancient kingdoms that had once made up England. Even the lands of Northumbria had once been two separate kingdoms, Deira and Bernicia, and rivalries still ran deep between the two, let alone between them and the south of England. The first solid mention of Uhtred comes in the year 995, when he is said to have worked with local monks in Durham to clear the site for a new cathedral that was to be built there. He married the daughter of Bishop Aldhun, an influential religious figure in the north, and likely received numerous estates that had once belonged to the church. For the next decade, Uhtred seems to have gradually consolidated his power and prepared himself to succeed his father. In 1005, however, a new king came to power in Scotland, and partly to prove his worth to his countrymen, partly simply because the opportunity arose because of instability in the south of England, he invaded Northumbria. Elfhelm, the ealdorman of York, allegedly did nothing, and Uhtred's father was similarly unable to act because of his old age. In the ensuing battle, it was Uhtred who would rise to the occasion, and it was Uhtred who rose to the king's favour as a result. Later that year, Elfhelm of York was murdered, possibly on the orders of Ethelred, and Uhtred was elevated to his former position, thus uniting the northern and southern portions of Northumbria under the House of Bambrough. Around this time, Uhtred, a man on the rise, remarried in order to solidify alliances with the Danes of York, this time to the daughter of an influential leader in the city. For the next several years, he ruled in the north as the most powerful and influential lord. In 1013, the Scandinavian raids of England culminated in a total invasion by Sweyn Forkbeard, the King of Denmark. In response, Ethelred fled to the continent, and Sweyn accepted the submission of the English lords at his new capital of Gainsborough. For Uhtred, a man surrounded by Danes, and possibly even with some Danish blood in him, yet a man who had essentially been made by King Ethelred, the decision must have been a difficult one. Nevertheless, just a handful of weeks later, Sweyn died, and the Witan of England called for Ethelred to return from his exile to rule once more. Sweyn's young son Canute fled back to Denmark with the remnants of his father's army to plan yet another invasion of England. Over the next year, Ethelred again proved to be an indecisive and unwise ruler, and by all accounts the Witan regretted their decision to recall him back to the throne. Nevertheless, the English lords had made their decision, and as such prepared themselves for the next invasion from Denmark, which was sure to come. Uhtred continued his meteoric rise during this time and remarried once again, this time to the king's daughter Elfgifu. He also campaigned in the defence of Wessex alongside the king's eldest son, the warrior prince Edmund Ironside. But ultimately he could not prevent Canute from invading his own lands around York, the population of which was largely friendly to the invader due to its heavily Danish population. Ethelred died later that year as he was besieged in London, and Uhtred subsequently made the same decision as most Danish lords in bending his knee to Canute, hailing him as the new king of England. It was then that Canute sent word to Uhtred that he accepted his allegiance and wished to meet in person to solidify the new alliance. Uhtred graciously accepted and headed north with his household warriors to meet the new king. In accordance with local custom, Uhtred and his men gave up their swords and axes before the meeting. Before they could react, however, a warband of heavily armed warriors led by Northumbrian Dane Thurbrand the Hold descended upon the Earl and his men, massacring them in cold blood on the orders of Canute, who had been wary of the loyalties of the Northern Lord. Uhtred was succeeded in Bernicia by his brother Eadwulf, whereas Eric of Hlathir, a Norwegian, was made Ealdorman of York, thus ensuring that no powerful Northern Lord could rise up against the new king. Uhtred's murder was bitterly resented by his family, and over the next 3 generations a blood feud raged between the families of the descendants of those involved. Uhtred's son Ealdred successfully avenged his father in 1024 by killing Thurbrand, whose own son in turn killed Ealdred a few years later. Finally, in 1074, during the time of Uhtred's great-grandson Waltheof, who had become Earl of Northumbria after the Norman conquest of England, the Northumbrian Earl attempted to end the blood feud once and for all by murdering the majority of Thurbrand's grandsons and great-grandsons. Uhtred's family continued to rule in Northumbria for decades to come, until they were finally forced out of power by the new Norman lords who ruled supreme after the conquest of 1066.